Okay, let's really dig into this. Have you ever felt like there's just an overwhelming amount of information out there and you just need someone to, cut through the noise, distill the facts, and deliver the essential insights? Well, that's precisely our mission here today. We're embarking on a deep dive into a really extensive body of source material. It offers a critical look at the Obama presidency, and our main source for this deep dive, it's a book called Messiah by Shawn Armstrong, published July 2025. And it really meticulously compiles critiques,
Right.
analyses of major policies, events from that time. Our goal is pretty straightforward. Guide you through these sources, pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge, maybe some surprising facts too, so you can quickly get well informed of the arguments presented without feeling, swamped.
Yeah. And what's truly compelling about this material is the sheer breadth of topics it covers. It's quite something. We're talking about everything from, granular economic policy, complex foreign affairs,
Hmm.
to the real nitty-gritty of healthcare reform and even internal governmental actions. Our objective here is just to synthesize these diverse critiques, present the information with complete impartiality. That's key. So you can clearly understand the specific points the author raises and their alleged implications, basically letting you form your own informed perspective.
Exactly. So, whether you're looking to catch up on some crucial historical context or you're just, frankly, intensely curious about the arguments around this period, prepare for some genuine aha moments as we explore these detailed and, yeah, often challenging arguments together. We're aiming to give you that shortcut to being well informed. So we're going to kick things off today by looking at the economy and fiscal policy during the Obama years, specifically focusing on critiques related to economic management and government spending, as laid out in our source. And the first point of contention, one that definitely struck a chord with many, it revolves around proposed cuts to military pensions and health care.
Hmm.
The source digs into this with quite a bit of detail. It actually labels it a broken pact.
Yeah, that's a strong phrase. And what's immediately striking are the specific financial impacts the source outlines. It gives an example. A service member joining at 18, retiring at 38, so after 20 years. The materials suggest their lifetime benefit could drop from about $1.8 million down to $1.7 million.
Okay, a $100,000 difference over a lifetime.
Exactly. Now, for those retiring a bit later, maybe at the average age of 24, the difference is smaller, percentage-wise, but still around $30,000 over their lifetime. Now, the stated intention behind these cuts, according to the source, was to redirect those savings back into military readiness, other defense programs,
Makes sense on paper, maybe?
perhaps. But for many who served, this felt deeply unsettling. It wasn't just seen as a budget tweak. It was viewed as, well, fundamentally breaking the deal, that implicit contract.
Yeah, I can see how that would feel like a betrayal. And it wasn't just hypothetical numbers for future retirees, right? The source details some really significant immediate concerns. The tangible impact on active military families and veterans, it paints a pretty stark picture of financial strain, very real for many.
It does.
For instance, it cites the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, revealing 340,000 veterans receiving public money just for housing assistance.
Wow.
And even more alarming, a staggering 900,000 veterans were reportedly living on food stamps.
900,000. That's huge.
Huge, and it even extended to active duty personnel. About 5,000 troops reportedly relying on food stamps while serving.
All actively serving.
Yeah, and the challenges were just compounding. Operation Homefront, that nonprofit supporting military families,
I know them.
they reported a dramatic 400% increase in requests for food assistance since 2008. It really underscores a growing crisis.
That really highlights a critical question about the financial strain on the very people we rely on for national security. Think about this. A soldier's basic pay at $18,194, according to the source, was well below the federal poverty line.
18,000. Yeah, that's low.
And that's often exacerbated by other things, like rising divorce rates, which you sometimes see after multiple deployments,
Sure.
and the subsequent child support payments. Makes it incredibly tough for many to make ends meet. The source even quotes Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel. He warned that troops and their families would be asked to make sacrifices on pay and benefits, all to preserve military readiness in an era of, tight budgets.
So it frames a difficult choice being made at the top.
A very difficult choice, yeah. That's the portrayal.
And these weren't just abstract warnings either.
Right.
The source says the new budget provisions specifically cut the cost of living adjustment, the TOA,
Right.
for military retirees to 1% less than consumer inflation.
Which effectively means falling behind each year.
Exactly. And what makes this particularly potent, according to the source, is that this reduction hit even wounded veterans.
Oh,
That's tough. A group many would argue should be absolutely shielded from cuts like that. Plus, there was a threatened veto of the whole defense authorization bill.
why was that?
Well, because the administration wanted to increase healthcare premiums and copays for troops, while also proposing cuts to scheduled military pay raises.
A double hit, essentially.
Seems like it. The source says the administration pushed for a 1% pay increase. But analysis suggested 1.8% was actually needed just to keep military pay aligned with private sector growth.
So falling behind there, too. The details on the TRICARE increases, the military healthcare program, are quite telling in the source material. For example, Medicare-eligible retirees in TRICARE for life. They saw a freeze on enrollment fees in 2014.
Okay, a temporary reprieve.
Temporary, yes, followed by projections of rapid and substantial increases in the following years. Flag officers, their annual enrollment fees were set to more than double, from $900 in 2014 to $8,840 by 2018.
Wow, that's a big jump.
And deductibles, too, set to rise consistently. For individuals, from $150 to $160 in 14, then up another $40 in 15, then $30 more each year through 18.
And for families?
Similar pattern. $300 to $320 in 14, another $80 jump in 15, then $60 more each year from 16 to 18. The key insight here, according to the source's argument, isn't just the dollars. It's that these cuts symbolize a potential shift in balancing fiscal priorities against long-standing military commitments.
Undermining morale, trust.
Potentially, yes. Undermining morale, trust, framing it as that broken pact with potentially big implications for recruitment or retention down the line.
And here's where it gets really thought-provoking. The source highlights this potential disparity in priorities. It notes funds being allocated for things like green energy initiatives for the Navy, and even things like same-sex weddings on military bases,
Right.
while at the same time, military families were facing these direct benefit cuts.
So a contrast being drawn.
A stark contrast. And it raises that big question. How do budget decisions reflect broader government priorities and values? The source quotes Republican Representative Buck McKeon. He said, quite directly,
Who did he say?
"We shouldn't ask our military to pay our bills when we aren't willing to impose a similar hardship on the rest of the population."
That puts it bluntly.
It really underscores the perceived unfairness, and it highlights this internal tension within the administration's fiscal strategy, at least from the perspective presented in the source, obviously. Okay, let's move beyond the military budget specifics now. Our source also casts a critical eye on the broader economic picture during the Obama presidency, describing any supposed economic success as little more than, quote, smoke and mirrors.
Right. And if we connect this to that bigger picture, the source suggests this recurring theme of miscalculation, especially regarding the intended deterrent effect of certain policies. We'll probably see this come up again later with the ACA fines. But specifically on the economy, it argues, quite pointedly, that the whole idea of save jobs from the big economic stimulus bill,
The $1 trillion one.
that one, yeah, which cost taxpayers about $1 trillion. The argument is that claiming success there relied heavily on what the source calls fuzzy math.
Fuzzy math. How so?
Well, the core critique is that there was, quote, no reliable way to track saved jobs.
So it's hard to prove a counterfactual what would have happened without it.
Exactly. So the source essentially calls any claim of widespread economic improvement from that specific bill an illusion, implying a lack of tangible, verifiable impact despite the huge cost.
Interesting critique. And this skepticism about economic claims, it seems to extend directly into the discussion of welfare and government assistance. The source gives some pretty striking dependency statistics that really make you pause.
Yeah, the numbers are high.
As of late 2012, it states that 109,631,000 individuals.
Over 109 million.
Yeah. Which was 35.4% of the entire U.S. population at the time. We're living in households receiving some form of federal welfare benefits, means-tested benefits.
And if you broaden that definition slightly, to include the non-means-tested federal programs.
Right, things like Social Security, Medicare, unemployment, veterans benefits,
Yeah.
where eligibility isn't based on income, but contributions or service.
Then the number jumps significantly higher. The source reports that by the end of 2012, it was 153,323,000 individuals receiving some form of federal assistance.
Over 153 million.
Yeah. And the source emphasizes an important distinction here between tree-paid benefits, like Social Security, which are theoretically funded by your past contributions, and the means-tested benefits, like traditional welfare or food stamps, which required direct tax money from the government based on the recipient's income and assets.
Okay, so drilling down into those means-tested programs, which were the largest.
According to the Census Bureau data cited, Medicaid was by far the biggest, providing assistance to nearly 83 million recipients and households, 82,679,000 to be exact.
Wow, Medicaid is huge.
Huge. Followed by SNAP, the food stamp program, supporting about 51.5 million people.
Okay.
Then WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children program, serving around 22.5 million.
Mm-hmm.
Supplemental Security Income, SSI, reached about 20.4 million recipients. And public housing or housing subsidies supported roughly 13.3 million people.
And the source notes Medicaid was expected to grow even more.
That's right, anticipated to rise further with the full implementation of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, because the ACA expanded Medicaid eligibility.
Right.
And it also offers subsidies for people earning up to 400% of the poverty level to buy insurance. So the point from the source seems to be suggesting this ongoing, maybe even accelerating expansion of the welfare landscape, further blurring the lines between what was historically seen as welfare and broader government services.
Interesting point. Okay, to give us some wider context on economic performance, the source then shifts gears. It delves into the fiscal health of various states, comparing those mainly under Republican control with those under Democrat control, and even one with split government. It's a really fascinating, detailed look at how different states were doing financially back then.
It is. Let's look at some of the Republican-controlled states first, as the source lays them out. North Dakota, for instance. Republican Governor Jack Dalrymple, strong Republican legislature. They showed a debt per capita of $3,282. That was among the lowest, nationally 22nd lowest.
Pretty good.
And crucially, it reported no budget deficit. Unemployment was remarkably low, the lowest in the country at 3.5%.
Wow.
Solid median income around $51,700 and a poverty rate of 12.2%, 13th lowest. So a strong picture there.
Okay, what about another one? Wyoming.
Wyoming, yeah. Republican Governor Matt Mead, Republican legislature, again, slightly lower debt per capita, $2,694, 18th lowest. But they did face a budget deficit of 10.3%, which ranked 32nd largest.
Some mixed bag there.
A bit. Unemployment was relatively low, though, 6.0%, 7th lowest nationally.
Yeah.
And a strong median income, over $56,000, 13th highest.
Okay. Nebraska.
Nebraska, under Republican Governor Dave Heineman, really stood out with incredibly low debt per capita, just $1,279.
That is low. Second lowest nationally.
Second lowest, yeah. But again, a budget deficit reported at 9.7%, ranking 34th largest. Unemployment was exceptionally low, though, 4.4%, second lowest. Median income, just over $50,000. Poverty, 13.1%, 15th lowest.
Utah, similar story.
Utah, firmly Republican under Governor Gary Herbert. Debt per capita, $2,356, 15th lowest. Budget deficit, 14.7%, 25th largest. Unemployment, 6.7%, 11th lowest. Median income strong, around $55,900. Poverty, 13.5%.
In Iowa.
Iowa, led by Republican Governor Terry Branstad. Even lower debt per capita, $1,690, 7th lowest nationally, but a budget deficit of 20.3%, ranking 18th largest. Unemployment low at 5.9%, 6th lowest. Median income just under $50,000, 12.8% poverty.
Okay, so some strong indicators in those Republican states, especially on debt and unemployment, but deficits were still an issue in several.
Exactly. It wasn't uniform.
Now, in contrast, the source brings up New Jersey. Republican Governor Chris Christie, but a Democrat-controlled legislature. Split control.
And the source highlights it as one of the bottom 5 states economically at that time.
Ouch. Why?
Well, substantial debt per capita, $6,944, 5th highest in the nation, and a huge 38.2% budget deficit, the 4th largest.
That's significant.
Unemployment also high at 9.3%, 14th highest.
But interestingly,
Yes.
despite those serious fiscal problems, New Jersey had a really high median income, right? 3rd highest.
That's right, $67,458. And a low poverty rate, 10.4%, 3rd lowest. So real paradox there. High income, low poverty, but deep fiscal trouble.
Fascinating. What about the Democrat-controlled states mentioned? Illinois.
Well, Illinois, under Governor Pat Quinn, Democrats controlling both chambers. Higher debt per capita, $4,790 nationally. Budget deficit was a massive 40.2%, second largest among all states.
40%.
Unemployment, 9.8%, 10th highest. Median income around $53,200. Poverty rate, 15.0%.
And Rhode Island.
Rhode Island, led by an independent governor, Lincoln Chafee, but a Democrat-controlled legislature, faces some of the biggest burdens. Debt per capita was $9,018, 3rd highest in the country.
$9,000 per person.
Yeah. Budget deficit, 13.4%, 28th largest. Unemployment was notably high, 11.3%, 3rd highest overall. Median income around $53,600. Poverty rate 14.7%.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The source lays out all these numbers. What stands out to you about these comparisons, given how the source presents them?
Well, what's striking isn't really a simple, definitive partisan conclusion. It's more the complex interplay you see. Fiscal policy, unemployment, debt. It varies across states, regardless of which party's in charge, it seems.
Right.
While some Republican states showed very low debt and unemployment, as we saw, others faced significant budget deficits, suggesting that a simple red versus blue divide doesn't capture the full picture.
And New Jersey complicates it further.
Exactly. The source seems to use New Jersey as this key counterexample. Republican governor, but split control, didn't automatically mean better outcomes in some fiscal areas. Despite that high median income, it just highlights the many variables at play beyond just party labels in how states perform economically.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's pivot now. Let's move into foreign policy and military engagement. Always a complex, often controversial area, especially during the Obama presidency.
Definitely.
The source provides a general critique of this period. It characterizes Obama as lacking strategic planning, citing several, quote, missteps and shortcomings in his approach to global affairs.
Yeah, what's interesting is how the source frames this critique. It starts broad, assessing Obama as, quote, doesn't seem to be much of a strategic planner. It then points to various issues as examples of this perceived failure, everything from the domestic ACA rollout.
Which isn't foreign policy, but okay.
Right, but uses an example of planning issues, to international crises like Gaza and Ukraine. But then it really zeroes in on this palpable sense of frustration within the military leadership.
How so?
It quotes retired four-star General Jack Keane. He described the U.S. Armed Forces as extremely frustrated. Frustrated by what he saw as a consistent lack of coherent strategy, especially regarding the rising threat of the Islamic State, ISIS.
Okay.
Keane asserted that the airstrikes happening then were just defensive and, crucially, insufficient to actually defeat ISIS.
Implying a disconnect.
A significant disconnect,
Yeah.
between military needs and the administration's strategic directives, according to the source's portrayal.
And then there's that White House claim about bringing tranquility to the world.
Ah, yes, Press Secretary Josh Earnest's claim.
The source directly challenges that. It lists 10 specific counterarguments, each basically a major international incident.
Let's tick through them. What's first?
First, the Syrian red line on chemical weapons. Widely publicized. Obama drew it. Source says Assad ignored it, gassed his own people anyway. Obama's subsequent inaction, the critique argues.
Created an opening for Putin.
Exactly. Putin stepped in, brokered a deal, effectively boosting Russia's influence there.
Okay, number two.
Russia's annexation of Crimea happened despite Obama's warnings.
And the response.
Source describes it as just a few monetary sanctions on Putin's associates, implying it wasn't enough to deter.
Shut it.
Third, the U.S. border, described as out of control, with thousands pouring into the country. The critique focuses on Obama's request for billions to house these individuals, but only 2% earmarked for actual border security. Bulk for housing, legal aid. Showing misaligned priorities, the source argues.
Fourth.
North Korea kept testing nukes and rockets, openly ridiculing Obama despite threats and warnings.
If.
Iran sanctions, Obama unilaterally lifted them against congressional advice.
And the critique.
That it allowed Iran to continue nuclear pursuits, with Rouhani allegedly boasting about humiliating Obama.
Okay. Sixth is Benghazi.
Yes, the tragic Benghazi attack. 911-20 on killing Ambassador Stevens and 3 others. Source highlights the immediate administration blame placed on an obscure YouTube video, a claim that became intensely controversial later.
Seventh.
U.S. aid to Egypt, suspended after the Muslim Brotherhood government was ousted,
Creating a vacuum.
which the source claims Russia quickly filled, stepping in to supply military hardware to Egypt.
Number 8 must be Bergdahl.
Yep, the controversial release of the Taliban 5 from Guantanamo in exchange for Sergeant Bo Bergdahl.
And these weren't just any detainees.
No. Described as notorious figures. A 2008 Pentagon dossier deemed them high risk for launching attacks if liberated.
Right.
Germany expelling a top U.S. intel official after the NSA spying scandal broke. Specifically, the tapping of Chancellor Merkel's personal phone. Ouch. And 10th.
10th, a really significant point.
Oh.
Obama's abrupt withdrawal from Iraq in 2011. The source argues the failure to secure a status of forces agreement with Iraq.
Directly led to a power vacuum.
And the subsequent rise of ISIS.
Exactly. So the source concludes this section basically saying, look, Obama isn't solely responsible for the complex world situation.
Of course not.
But believing he brought tranquility during this time. That requires a significant suspension of disbelief given this list of events.
It's a strong critique based on that selected list.
Definitely. Okay, another deeply contentious area explored thoroughly in the source is the impact of the rules of engagement in Afghanistan, suggesting a deadly dilemma for U.S. troops on the ground.
Yeah, this specific point raises that incredibly difficult question, the balance between minimizing civilian casualties in a war zone,
Which is crucial.
absolutely crucial, and simultaneously ensuring the safety and effectiveness of your own troops. It also highlights how incredibly hard it is to definitively link policy changes to specific battlefield outcomes.
So what's the specific allegation here?
The source alleges that stricter rules of engagement put in place by the Obama administration directly coincided with a significant concerning increase in U.S. battlefield fatalities, specifically in 2009 and 2010.
How significant?
To put it in perspective, in 2010, the first full year of the troop surge, 499 Americans were killed. That's roughly 5 times the annual death toll from 2006-2007, and 3 times the number from 2008.
Even though troop strength had roughly doubled.
Exactly. That's the key ratio the source points to. Despite more troops, the fatality rate seemingly increased during that period under the new rules.
And the practical impact of these rules, according to the source.
Very clear, it argues. Rules preventing firing if there was a perceived risk to civilians effectively cut back on crucial support, like airstrikes, artillery. The source quotes Wayne Simmons, a retired U.S. intelligence officer. He said bluntly these rules created hesitation and confusion for soldiers. Simmons directly argued casualties more than doubled from Jan 09 to August 10, specifically coinciding with the Obama-McChrystal radical change in the rules.
Strong words. Anyone else quoted?
Yes, retired Air Force Lieutenant General Thomas McInerney. He said, and I quote, "We handcuffed our troops in combat needlessly. This was very harmful to our men and has never been done in U.S. combat operations that I know of." And it provides a stark, real-world example. Former Army Captain William Swenson, a Medal of Honor recipient. Swenson recounted a horrific siege at Ganjgal. He was denied crucial airstrikes for hours.
Leading to
5 of the 13 U.S. forces there were killed. Swenson expressed deep frustration with commanders, lawyers, second-guessing battlefield decisions from afar.
That's powerful testimony.
It is. And John Bernard, the father of Marine Lance Postmile Joshua Bernard, killed in an ambush. He issued an emotional warning against these new rules, said powerfully, "You err on the side of your guys, not the civilians."
Heartbreaking.
He went on to describe the rules as so convoluted, so open-ended, that it puts the people on the ground at risk no matter what they do. It paints this picture of intense disagreement, deep concern from those directly impacted.
But the source presents a counter perspective too, right? It's important to include that.
Absolutely. It ensures balance. James Russell, an instructor at the Naval Postgraduate School, he stated clearly he knew of no way to quantify or gather evidence, demonstrating a direct correlation between more casualties and the changed rules.
So he questions the direct link.
He does. He attributes the increased casualties primarily to the nature of the operations then, particularly in Taliban-controlled Helmand province. U.S. forces, as he put it, went looking for the enemy to take him on in the ground he controlled.
Which naturally leads to more intense fighting.
Exactly. A much more violent environment, he said. He acknowledged the restricted rules aimed at minimizing civilian harm, complicated operations,
Sure.
but cautioned it would be overly simplistic to blame the casualty rise solely on that single factor.
Okay, so a complex issue with differing viewpoints presented. Let's shift focus now to the broader state of the military. The source details some pretty grave warnings about military readiness that came from the National Defense Panel.
Right, this panel.
They asserted that significant defense budget cuts, plus the administration's plans for a smaller military, as outlined in the 2014 Quadrennial Defense Review, the QDR.
Which is the Pentagon's big strategic assessment.
Right. That all this left the U.S. Armed Forces, quote, inadequate. Inadequate to respond effectively to growing global threats as they saw them.
And their concerns were quite specific, weren't they? Broken down by branch.
Very specific. For the Air Force, it was described as fielding the smallest and oldest combat aircraft force in its entire history.
Smallest and oldest, that's concerning.
And projected to shrink even more, down to just 50% of its inventory by 2019.
Halved.
The panel saw this as significantly increasing national security risks, leading to strong recommendations. Increase manned and unmanned ISR aircraft, that's intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, and long-range strike capabilities.
And for the Army and Marine Corps.
Proposed cuts to their end strength, the total number of active duty personnel, were deemed excessive.
The panel argued forcefully their numbers should not fall below pre-9/11 levels. That's 490,000 active Army soldiers, 182,000 active Marines.
So what does this all boil down to for national defense, according to this view?
Well, the source is essentially arguing that these policy shifts, the budget cuts, the troop reductions, were actively creating a dangerous vulnerability, especially in the face of what the panel saw as rising and diverse global threats.
And the panel pushed back on the idea of needing a smaller force.
Strongly, they asserted that the logic of the two-war construct, the idea that the U.S. military needs to be able to fight two major conflicts at once, was as powerful as ever.
So maintain that capability.
Yes, they recommended a much more expansive force size, directly contradicting the administration's leaner approach.
And this two-war construct, it goes back a ways, right?
It does. It refers back to the flexible response doctrine from the Kennedy administration, 1961. That doctrine specifically called for capability to fight two major wars simultaneously, plus a smaller regional conflict.
But the Obama administration changed that strategy.
Explicitly changed it in 2012.
Yeah.
Shifted to a one-war focus.
Yeah.
Partly attributed by the source to war fatigue in the country. But the source argues forcefully this change contradicted the simultaneous threats the U.S. faced then. Iran, Syria, the strategic pivot to Asia, the ongoing war in Afghanistan.
A mismatch between strategy and reality, in their view.
That's the argument. It also highlights the profound long-term implications. Military acquisitions, for example, Navy ships bought today, they'll still be the core of the fleet in 2065. So current policy changes impact the armed forces for decades.
A very long tail on those decisions.
Okay.
Still in foreign policy, the source spends significant time on the Boberg-Dahl release, presenting it as a major diplomatic gamble.
Yeah, this is where the narrative gets really compelling, as you said, because the source details how getting an American soldier home, a long-sought goal, involved taking significant immediate risks, especially given the backgrounds of the 5 individuals released in exchange.
So who were these 5 Taliban commanders released from Guantanamo?
His source is clear. These weren't just low-level guys. They were described as notorious figures, considered some of the worst of the worst.
Based on what?
A 2008 Pentagon dossier on Guantanamo inmates is cited directly. It deemed all 5 a high risk for launching attacks against the United States and its allies if liberated.
Painting a pretty stark picture of the perceived danger.
Absolutely. And the source names them, gives chilling details. Mullah Muhammad Fazl, Mullah Nurullah Nouri, Abdul Haq Wasik, Kirula Karakwa, and Mohammad Nabi Omari.
Let's break down those backgrounds as presented.
Taliban's former deputy defense minister, wanted by the UN for massacres targeting Afghanistan's Shiite population.
Okay.
A senior Taliban military figure. Personally asked by Osama bin Laden back in '95 to participate in an offensive.
Wasik.
Former deputy minister of intelligence for the Taliban. Described as a crucial liaison between the Taliban and other fundamentalist groups. His dossier also noted he was intentionally withholding info during interrogations.
Okay.
Former Taliban governor, considered not just a likely heroin trafficker, but also potentially plotted attacks with Iranian officials. Held several key military leadership roles. Responsible for organizing al-Qaeda and Taliban militias fighting U.S. forces right at the start of the war.
So these were definitely not minor players.
Far from it. Individuals with deep ties to extremist activities, according to these descriptions.
And the process of the release itself, the source details that too.
It does. Initially, the White House withheld the names of the detainees. The exchange itself happened peacefully in eastern Afghanistan near the border, with U.S. Special Ops involved.
But Congress was opposed.
Historically opposed to such releases, yes. But here's a crucial point the source raises. A seemingly small change was made in the fiscal year 2014 National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA, passed in December 13.
What change?
It specifically removed the prior requirement for full congressional approval for these transfers. It only mandated notification to the Defense Secretary.
Lowering the bar significantly.
Exactly. That legislative change, the source argues, paved the way for the swap, despite previous bipartisan opposition.
And there were concerns afterwards.
Significant concerns about the potential for these guys to replenish diminished Taliban leadership. And questions about the appropriate assurances from Qatar, where they were transferred. Assurances about their security, the one-year travel ban. How effective would that really be?
A lot of unanswered questions and potential risks highlighted there. Okay, let's keep moving through foreign policy. Covert operations in Libya and Syria. The source details how these actions really brought up those enduring questions about presidential authority versus congressional involvement in military actions.
Yeah, this part of the source really hits on a fundamental question for any democracy, doesn't it? When should a president seek explicit congressional approval for military action?
Right.
And what are the profound implications of those decisions on that delicate balance of powers?
So, Libya first. What does the source say?
He points out President Obama signed a secret presidential finding. This legally authorized covert U.S. government support for Libyan rebels trying to oust Gaddafi.
A necessary legal step for the CIA to operate.
Yes. But the White House initially declined to comment on potentially providing arms to those rebels. That lack of transparency drew scrutiny early on.
And Obama's stated goal.
He publicly said he wanted Gaddafi to ultimately step down. Emphasized using steady pressure, not only militarily, but also through these other means.
But concerns arose quickly.
They did, as detailed in the source. Concerns about potentially violating a UN arms embargo on Libya, and also significant fears that weapons could inadvertently end up with anti-American militants.
Echoes of Afghanistan in the 80s.
Exactly, those parallels were drawn. Representative Mike Rogers, then chair of the House Intel Committee, publicly opposed supplying arms at this time. He wanted a clearer understanding of who exactly the opposition groups were.
Okay, now Syria, after the chemical attack there.
Obama's decision to seek congressional approval for a strike was highlighted as a significant departure.
Compared to previous presidents.
Yes. The source points to Clinton in Sudan, Afghanistan, Kosovo, Reagan in Libya, Grenada, all acted without explicit congressional approval in those specific instances.
So why the departure? What did critics suggest?
Critics like Peter Mansour suggested it was maybe a strategic way for Obama to back away from the red line he'd drawn on chemical weapons use, or maybe to escape responsibility for the outcome.
And conservative analyst David Frum.
He asserted Obama basically put the responsibility into the hands of a Congress that is notoriously paralyzed and dysfunctional. A pointed critique.
It's also noted that Obama himself had previously set a high bar for unilateral action.
Right. Back in 2007, he'd stated a president couldn't unilaterally authorize attacks without an actual or imminent threat. Yet for Syria, he framed the chemical attack as exactly that, a direct threat.
So the whole situation just underscored that intense ongoing debate in U.S. governance, presidential war powers versus the role of Congress.
Precisely.
Right. Our deep dive wouldn't be complete without tackling the really serious allegations,
Yeah.
legal violations, executive overreach, misinformation that emerged during the Obama presidency. The source material, Messiah, it really doesn't hold back here, presents a wide array of claims.
No, it doesn't. And what's truly striking in this section is just the sheer volume and scope of these allegations, covering everything from domestic policy implementation to critical national security decisions.
Where does it start?
It specifically claims the administration controversially waived the work requirement for welfare recipients. That was a key provision of the bipartisan '96 welfare reform law signed by Clinton.
Right. Work requirements were central to that reform.
And this waiver, according to the source, was done without explicit congressional approval, which allegedly implicates Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, the part about legislative authority belonging primarily to Congress.
Okay, what else? The NDAA?
Yes, the National Defense Authorization Act, specifically Section 121, faced intense criticism. The source alleges it effectively negated due process rights, potentially violating multiple amendments, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th.
That's a lot of amendments. Remind us due processes.
The fundamental right of a citizen to a fair legal process before the government can take action against them. Life, liberty, property.
Got it. The source also points to executive orders.
Several EOs that it argues raise serious constitutional concerns about executive overreach. For example, EO 13603, National Defense Resources Preparedness, alleged to grant sweeping powers to seize resources in an emergency.
Okay.
EO 13524, dealing with Interpol, allegedly extended Interpol's jurisdiction on U.S. soil beyond its traditional international law enforcement scope. And EO 13636, on infrastructure cybersecurity. Criticized for supposedly bypassing Congress in its implementation, again hitting that Article 1, Section 1 nerve.
And there was something about taxing political contributions.
An alleged attempt, yeah, which the source argues raised significant First Amendment concerns, freedom of speech, association.
And DOMA, Defense of Marriage Act.
The source claims Obama directed the Justice Department to effectively ignore the Constitution and separation of powers by not enforcing DOMA. This action, it asserts, called into question Article 2, Section 3, the President's duty to faithfully execute the laws.
What about Dodd-Frank and the CFPB?
The establishment of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau under Dodd-Frank, tasked with both writing and interpreting financial law, cited as potential overreach of legislative authority. Again, Article 1, Section 1 concerns.
And drone strikes, we touched on that briefly.
Yes, serious concerns about drone strikes against American citizens. Anwar al-Awlaki, killed in Yemen in 2011, is a prime example cited. The source alleges this action negated Fifth Amendment due process rights, the right to a fair legal process before life is taken.
What about the EPA?
The administration was criticized for allegedly bypassing Congress to grant the EPA broad powers for cap-and-trade initiatives, viewed as encroachment on legislative powers.
And those graphic tobacco warnings.
An attempt to implement them, seen by some as compelled speech, raised First Amendment issues. Under appeal at the time, the source notes. There's more on appointments, too.
Right, the recess appointments.
4 specific executive appointments made when the Senate wasn't officially in recess, later ruled unconstitutional by courts. Yet the appointees allegedly stayed in their positions, which the source argues violated Article 2, Section 2, the President's appointment powers.
And the czars?
The appointment of numerous agency czars without Senate approval, criticized for bypassing the normal confirmation process.
Even chairing the UN Security Council was questioned.
The source highlights Obama assuming the UN Security Council chairmanship, alleged it violated Section 9 of the Constitution related to emoluments and titles from foreign powers.
Okay, back to Obamacare, the ACA. Constitutional challenges there, too.
Several. The Supreme Court reclassifying the individual mandate as a tax instead of a penalty. That raised a fresh debate on Congress's authority to compel individuals into commerce. Article 1, Sections 1 and 8 territory.
And the waivers.
The source alleged a lack of clear presidential authority to unilaterally dispense numerous healthcare waivers, and a perceived refusal to acknowledge states' 10th Amendment rights, the right to nullify federal laws they deem unconstitutional, citing the Arizona lawsuit over immigration law as context.
What about the Chrysler bailout?
Controversial. Facilitated via TARP funds. Alleged to have violated creditors' rights and basic bankruptcy law, infringing the Takings Clause and Due Process Clauses of the Fifth Amendment by reportedly prioritizing labor unions over secured creditors. That was the claim.
And IPAB under the ACA.
The Independent Payment Advisory Board also raised Article 1, Section 1 concerns. Why? Because its appointees, chosen by the president, could make decisions that automatically became law, arguably bypassing the legislative process.
Libya again. From a legal perspective this time.
The military intervention there. Source strongly asserts it lacked explicit congressional approval, making it illegal under Article 1, Section 8, Congress's power to declare war. Labeled the first illegal war, potential grounds for impeachment from this viewpoint. Highlights Obama's controversial assertion that the UN could sometimes override congressional war powers.
Gun control EOs.
Alleged Obama issued 21 executive orders on gun control, including one amending Obamacare to allow doctors' hospitals to investigate gun ownership, raising significant privacy and Second Amendment concerns.
And the UN Firearms Treaty.
The administration directed the signing of it. Implications for the Second Amendment, according to the source.
What about the immigration bill?
The Senate Obama immigration bill allegedly raised revenue but violated Section 7 of the Constitution. Revenue bills must originate in the House.
Finally, the employer mandate delay.
Yes. Delaying upholding the employer mandate part of Obamacare until 2015, while the individual mandate was enforced. Alleged presidential overreach, Article 1, Section 1, Article 2, Section 3, and potentially violating the Equal Protection Clause, 14th Amendment, by treating individuals and employers differently.
Okay, let's definitely unpack this section further. It's incredibly dense, packed with significant allegations. Beyond these specific legal and constitutional challenges, the source piles on numerous accusations about misleading statements, a perceived lack of transparency.
Yeah, there are a lot.
It touches on accusations against multiple White House staff, figures like Susan Rice, Robert Gibbs, allegedly instructed to misrepresent facts on critical issues, Benghazi, drone policy, even told not to disclose the use of drones. This section, you can tell, just raises huge questions about accountability.
It does. And what's impactful here is the range of specific examples the source provides to back these claims. Makes them feel quite concrete. It starts with Obama's own words near the end of his term. I'm just telling the truth now. I don't have to run for office again, so I can just, let her rip.
Which the source interprets how?
As implying past dishonesty. It also notes PolitiFact's infamous lie of the year for that promise. If you like your plan, you can keep it. under the ACA.
Right, that became a major point of criticism.
Then he gets specific about key figures. Susan Rice, then UN ambassador, allegedly delivered political talking points on Benghazi on the Sunday shows, supposedly at the administration's behest. Later accused of presenting half-truths about the Bergdahl swap.
Okay, who else?
Obama aide Dan Pfeiffer allegedly instructed Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner to misrepresent Social Security as the primary driver of the national debt.
Misdirection.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
National security officials allegedly testified to Congress. The NSA didn't secretly collect data on Americans, later directly contradicted by revelations.
Right, the Snowden leaks.
Then Press Secretary Jay Carney claimed Ben Rhodes' email about Benghazi talking points wasn't about Benghazi. And Robert Gibbs, another press secretary, reportedly misled reporters on drone policy. Later admitted he'd been told by the White House not to disclose the use of drones.
So, a pattern alleged here.
The source also points to instances where political aides allegedly dismissed policy aides' concerns about the accuracy of that "if you like your plan, you can keep it" promise, which, as we know, became PolitiFact's Lie of the Year. It paints this picture of deliberate efforts to control the narrative, according to the critique.
Then there's the IRS targeting controversy, conservative groups, Tea Party groups.
A huge story at the time. Judicial Watch documents from May 2014, cited in the source, allegedly show the IRS handling of Tea Party applications for tax-exempt status was directed from D.C. headquarters.
Not just rogue agents in Cincinnati.
That was the counter-narrative, but these documents suggested D.C. involvement. Emails from Lois Lerner, a key IRS official, detailed her supposedly misleading explanations to investigators.
And pressure from Congress alleged, too.
The source points to what it calls extensive pressure from Senator Carl Levin, a Democrat, on the IRS to shut down conservative-leaning tax-exempt organizations. It even details the specific "be on the lookout" or "below" criteria allegedly used by the IRS to screen these cases.
What were they?
Applications mentioning Tea Party, Patriots, or 9/12 Project, groups focused on government spending, debt, taxes, groups educating the public via advocacy, even groups making statements critical of how the country is being run.
Wow, that sounds potentially very broad, suggests targeting based on political viewpoint.
That's the core allegation presented, yes.
The administration also faced accusations of defying congressional subpoenas.
Directly. The White House stated political advisor David Seamus would not answer a subpoena from a congressional oversight committee, claimed executive immunity.
Which contrasted with
the administration's public claims of being the most transparent in history. That contrast is highlighted by the source, and this connects to that Benghazi email comparison you mentioned.
Right. 2 copies of the same email chain. One to Congress, heavily redacted names by State Dept. One to Judicial Watch, names not redacted.
The discrepancy, the source suggests, strongly implied senior-level involvement in media damage control, not full transparency.
This specific point really raises that important question, doesn't it? The long-term implications of executive actions that allegedly breach constitutional principles.
Exactly. The balance of power between branches, public trust in government, it all comes into play.
Okay, beyond those major categories, the source lists numerous other allegations that add to the overall picture it's painting.
It's quite a list.
Includes the Justice Department reviewing AP reporters' phone records in a leak investigation.
Rosengate, the DOJ labeling Fox News reporter James Rosen a criminal, monitoring his phone's mails, questioning AG Holder's credibility on his involvement.
Fast and Furious, the ATF gun-running scheme into Mexico, tragically leading to Border Patrol agent Brian Terry's death. Holder allegedly lied to Congress about his knowledge, leading to a contempt vote.
HHS Secretary Kathleen Sebelius reportedly soliciting donations from companies she'd regulate to enroll people in Obamacare.
The Pigford scandal, the agriculture debt program for black farmers, allegedly disbursed billions to many who, the source claims, likely didn't experience actual discrimination.
The GSA's extravagant $823,000 Vegas training conference. VA financial mismanagement, $6 million wasted on Orlando conferences, highlighting fiscal responsibility issues.
Solyndra, the green energy company, administration accused of promoting it despite financial troubles, even allegedly pressuring them to delay layoffs until after the 2010 midterms.
EPA Administrator Lisa Jackson, using the pseudonym Richard Windsor in emails, raising suspicions of evading oversight.
The new Black Panthers voter intimidation case DOJ allegedly failed to pursue charges, raising racial double-standard concerns.
Vice President Biden allegedly interfering with press coverage, claims of forcing a reporter in a closet, deleting photos, editing pool reports.
Millions allocated to former advisor David Axelrod's firm, AKPD, to promote Obamacare, raising questions about assisting a $2 million debt owed to Axelrod. The "Sestak will take care of you" allegation, an offer of an unpaid advisory position to Joe Sestak to get him to drop out of a 2010 primary.
And finally, that assertion Obama would pass my own laws, referring to his perceived tendency to bypass Congress by selectively enforcing laws, like not deporting immigrants who might have qualified under the DREAM Act.
Wow. We've certainly covered a tremendous amount of ground today, really delving deep into these varied critiques of the Obama presidency, explored complex economic decisions, foreign policy interventions, the intricacies of healthcare reform, and this wide range of allegations about executive overreach, transparency issues.
Yeah, it's a lot.
The source material, Shawn Armstrong's Messiah, definitely paints a picture of a complex, often turbulent era, highlighting numerous controversies, significant challenges faced by that administration.
And if we connect all of this back to the bigger picture, the sheer volume, the detailed nature of these specific criticisms, it really invites a much deeper reflection, doesn't it, on how policy decisions actually get made.
Yeah.
The inherent challenges of governing a complex nation like the U.S., and those often unintended consequences that can pop up, even from well-intentioned policies. It definitely encourages critical thinking about the historical record, about the various narratives that inevitably surround any period of significant leadership.
So, what does this all mean for you, our listener, as you process this? As we wrap up this particular deep dive, maybe consider this provocative thought. How do these detailed critiques spanning the economy, foreign policy, domestic issues, how do they shape your understanding of the complexities, the inevitable trade-offs involved in governing?
That's a good question.
And maybe more broadly, what does this tell us about that continuous, ongoing process of evaluating leadership, evaluating public policy, long after the fact, as history keeps unfolding?
Food for thought, definitely.
We really hope this deep dive has given you a clear, engaging, and well-informed shortcut to understanding these critical perspectives laid out in the source. Join us next time for another deep dive into the information that truly matters to you.